Oh yeah, I totally saved them all. I can't wait to eat
So we'll drink and then we'll get the show on. I'm going to pass this sign-in sheet around, guys. If you don't mind, name, phone number, social security number, date of birth, driver's license number.
I'll give you one of those.
Oh, it could be pretty big. Oh, is it really tricky going back?
I was actually like, it's one of my only channels where I've gone into like it's almost done. And for some reason the other day, because I keep it on my page for like a little bit, and then I was like, oh, I should start using it again. And then this morning I was like looking through, like it's like literally like all over like December 18th, 2017. Like this is the journal. Like I went and bought it for this. Looking at it, that's all. How many bills I just have?
Yeah, it's tough being a grown-up. What's the alternative?
There is none.
You can't go back to being a kid, so.
Suck it up.
So weird. Just like a lost presentation.
Roll. Yeah.
So weird.
Is there something I can do to help you out?
No. Literally like a. This will work. All right, guys, we'll get going. So I have a sign-in sheet going around. I think if you can give us your name, email, that kind of thing, so we can stay in touch, and we'll get the show on the road tonight. My name's Rich. I'm the CEO here at FAVOR Greenville. Real quick about me and my background. This is sort of who I am professionally. I'm also a person in recovery myself. For me, it's been 19 years. So my deal, alcohol use disorder, opioid use disorder. I started when I was probably around 14, just with kids in the neighborhood. We know that the age of first use is the biggest predictor on whether or not you'll develop a problem, so that's exactly how it went down with me. I limped along for quite a while. Probably my mid-20s, maybe my late 20s was when this took on a different tone, and it moved from boys will be boys, let's just have a good time, to something different. And then in 1999, I was in a car accident, and I walked out of the emergency room with 120 Darvocet, and as you can imagine, it was all downhill from there. I found recovery in 2001. So this group tonight, though, is meant to focus on the family and to talk about what the family is dealing with. We don't card people at the door, so we don't know whether you're here because you're a family member or you're here because you're in recovery. If you're here and you're in recovery and you share too much, I'm going to ask you not to share. Don't take that personally or anything, but we've had people come to these meetings who are in recovery and kind of take it over, and that's not going to go down on my watch. No, seriously, it's a family group. So if we do share and we're in recovery, we want to do it on the orientation of helping the family. And helping the family, what do I mean by that? Educating, informing, supporting, and trying to help you guys figure out what your next steps are in any given situation. This is one of the hardest things to deal with. It's one of the most baffling things to deal with. It's interesting. You think about family recovery and you think about addiction as a disease, right? Substance use disorder as a disease. The problem is it's not like any other disease that we deal with. There's so many issues associated with this that you don't deal with in other diseases. Like what? Like in other diseases, the person generally wants help. Generally speaking, they want help. If I go to your average person who's dealing with cancer, if I go to almost everybody dealing with cancer and I say, hey, just made arrangements, I got a space for you at the Mayo Clinic, let's get you on a plane, we're going to fly you there. Most people are going to say, where do I go, when can I get there, I'll be there on time, holy cow, thank you. if I go to your average person dealing with addiction and I say, hey, got you a spot at Hazelden Betty Ford, best facility in the nation, let's go, most people say what? Screw you, get away from me. So it's very hard for family members to figure this out, and I get it. The other thing about this that's so difficult is it's ongoing. I had an issue with my son, and a lot of you guys know this. I had an issue with my 6-year-old son where he landed in the hospital, and it was life-threatening, and he was in a drug-induced coma for 5 days, and we didn't know what was going to happen. We didn't know what it was called, but he was there, and it was during that period of time, and it started and it ended. And he was receiving treatment the whole time. The problem with addiction is what? It seems like it can go on forever. It seems like it can go from one incident to another incident to another incident, and you start to feel like, when am I ever going to be done with this? And that's not a good feeling. It's traumatic. It's stressful. It's anxiety producing. So we have to start to think, what are the goals and how do we even help families? And there are different things associated with that. We can help you try to figure out what to do for your loved one. That's one thing, right? We can help you, try to figure out what all the options are. Who can you call? Where can you call? What can you do? Do you want to do an intervention? Do you want to do a family meeting? But we can also talk about, how do you handle your stress? How do you handle the situation regardless of what's going on with your loved one? And we're going to talk about both those things tonight as we go through. So one topic that was suggested is detachment, and I'm going to talk about that. That made the list. Does anybody else have any questions or burning desires or issues that they're dealing with that they feel like they definitely want to talk about tonight? And you can always bring it up as we go through, but anything else off the top of your head?
Okay, so my son's 21 and he's been in Florida for a year in some type of rehab / halfway. He messed up pretty good, so now he's back in detox, back in PHP. So please tell me that this year has not been for naught. And also, when another counselor said, never let them come back home after they've been to treatment. So talk about those.
Well, I think that's one of the most nonsensical things I've ever heard anyone say. And you can tell whoever said that I would never say never to anything. Do you guys get that? I don't understand why you would ever say never. I think the details of any given situation are extremely important. Are there circumstances that I've been engaged in where somebody shouldn't come home? Yes, I've seen that. I've seen that happen. But I mean, I don't think that you could. I don't think even in those circumstances you could say never. Maybe a better way to say it is, it would be best if so-and-so doesn't come home, or I recommend that so-and-so doesn't come home. What was the reason for that? What's the rationale behind that?
Getting back into their little playground.
Yeah, so one of the things, especially with younger people, it's not uncommon to hear get them out of Dodge and kind of keep them out of Dodge. You'll absolutely hear that. And I get the logic behind that, because younger people do have a harder time detaching from friends. There's no question about that. But again, I think that I would avoid anything I would avoid any vibe around never. I think you can always look at situations, and I got to tell you what, you're going to have to look at situations. Your first question around, tell me that this wasn't for naught. Absolutely it wasn't for naught. Especially as people are younger, the problem is that this is such an experiential process, and recovery is so non-linear. It's such a circular, kind of one step forward, 2 steps back, that kind of thing, that it's almost normal. Unfortunately, it's almost normal for people to mess up. Now what happens when they mess up is that they feel like they have to start over. They feel like they got to go back to square one. And the way that the healthcare system or the health response is, it feels like that, because you'll literally hear people say, I had to start back over at detox. It feels like you're going back to the beginning of a process, right? That's not how you want to think about it. It's like any other disease. If there's a relapse in symptoms, you have to go back to the hospital. If there's a relapse in symptoms, you have to go get the special kind of help that you have to. It doesn't throw away all the things that you've learned along the way. Any time a person is working a recovery process, it accrues to the overall likelihood that they're going to be okay. It's just, and I wish it wasn't like this. I wish it was this kind of clean and predictable process where We sent you off and we dipped you in the waters of recovery at the destination rehab, right? Where they have state-of-the-art facilities, because they all have state-of-the-art facilities. And they have equine therapy and yoga on the beach, because they all have equine therapy and yoga on the beach, right? And so you go and you get dipped into the waters of recovery, and you come back and you live happily ever after. I wish it was that way, but your son's experience is much more common. And that's how it's always been from the beginning of the recovery process. That's how it was for me. I haven't met anybody who said, like, okay, here I go, I'm going to getting recovery, I'm going to getting clean, and then boom, day one, they were good to go forever. Every single person I've ever worked with, and I've worked with thousands of people, have had these type of setbacks. The deal is, how do you keep their head in the game? How do you keep them engaged so that they can stay alive, stay moving forward, continue to make progress? As they get older, it's much more likely that people are going to get this, and as they try over and over again, it's much more likely. The problem is 9 out of 10 people quit trying. They become frustrated, and they say, what do? Screw it. Kind of like if you're on a diet and you eat one Oreo cookie, what do? I mean, come on now. You all can like act like you don't do it, but if you eat one Oreo cookie, you hammer that whole sleeve. I mean, I do that. You should see me with a box of Oreos. It's nasty, man. It's usually like 2 o'clock in the morning. There's milk flying everywhere, Oreo cookie flying everywhere. You know, oh, I tried and I can't do this. I tried, I just can't do this. I'm constitutionally incapable of getting recovery, right? Terrible things to say, horrible things to say, not even based in fact, not even based in psychological principles, 100% false, and also very defeatist, a very defeatist way of looking at it. You kind of set yourself up for failure when you think that way. Here's the deal. Get right back on the horse, and in this case, if that's detox, that's fine. Get right back into detox, start this process over. If I were you, my advice would be, don't even be talking about whether or not he even comes ever back here. It would literally be, get back into detox and what's happening tomorrow. And then after detox, where are you going from there? And then you can go to the other questions down the road. Does anybody have any experience with that they would share with their family members? Anybody have anything that they would want to add? Does that make sense to everybody in here? There's a psychological principle called the abstinence violation effect. And it's interesting, it transcends all human beings, it transcends all issues, and it's our tendency to throw the towel in. You go into the gym, you go to the gym 3 days in a row, you miss the 4th day, that makes it easier to miss the 5th day, you miss 3 days in a row, and you're really like, I'm done, I'm not going back. And you don't go back until the next year, until the next New Year's resolution, okay?
Next bank draft.
Yes. And also, you have to remember that when it comes to progress in recovery, there are symptoms that a person kind of enters into that dictates whether or not folks like me would say, hey, that person meets criteria for addiction. And in order to have a relapse, you have to go the whole way back to those symptoms. Using and slipping up does not mean that you go back the whole way back to the beginning of those symptoms. Sometimes that can happen. Especially if you don't come back in and you don't try. I mean, a day can turn into a month, can turn into 6 months, can turn into a year. That looks a lot different than I was using for the last month. Do you guys understand that? And so the deal is, get back in it. Get right back on the horse. Any other thoughts or comments on that part of the process?
I like that word, slipping up. That was neat.
Yeah, so you'll hear people use the word slip. You'll also hear people use the word lapse rather than relapse. And another term that gets thrown around on the medical end is recurrence. A recurrence. And we try to avoid the term relapse unless it's a full-blown relapse. Now, let's get real though. Whenever that happens, if that happens, family members get upset, and they should get upset. If I go out, I've been in recovery 19 years. If I go out tonight after this meeting and have a couple beers and hang out a little bit, smoke a little weed, have a little good time, which is really weird for the CEO of FAVOR Greenville, but if I were to do that and I went home and I said to my wife, oh, hey, come on, it's a disease, I just had a little slip. Give me a break, man. She's gonna punch me in the face and start to plot my death. You know what I mean? Like, it's not ever gonna feel good. Do you guys get that? It's never gonna feel good for the family member. You're not gonna shrug it off. Why is that? Why are you not going to shrug it off?
It's a slippery slope.
So one is, it could be a slippery slope. It could be a slippery slope, right? So there is the reality that you do it once, you do it twice. It could be a slippery slope. Well, yes.
A lot of painful memories.
I feel like that's a big deal. A lot of painful memories, almost like what I would say is it's a trauma response. It's almost like re-triggering a trauma. It's not even about what just happened. It's about what happened over the last 10 years or the last 5 years. And your brain goes to, oh, here we go again. Here we go again. It's not about one time. It's not about one trip to detox. It's about every other time, and we're just going to be right back there. And I get that, because that can happen, but that's what you want to fight against. Carolyn?
If they go back, use whatever we want to term it, if they don't use what was their drug of choice. I mean, I'm not saying it's right or it's wrong, but is that less likely to go?
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question, and the truth is no one knows. So there's this idea that if you use any psychoactive substance, that it'll trigger you and return you to your old use of whatever your drug was, and or it'll get out of control in that area. That's why we encourage, stay away from everything, even if it wasn't what you were into. At the end of the day, I don't like to think of it as, I did one thing and boom, I'm gone. I don't want people to think of it that way, but I do want people to be cautious. There is no guarantee. The truth is no one knows for sure exactly how that's going to play out with any given person. What we know is that there's a way of getting better. There's a pathway to recovery. Let's just call it that. There's a pathway to recovery. It involves what? Talking to people, being at meetings, even if you are using, trying to figure out what you want to do with your use. Does that make sense? Talking to people like me, hey Rich, this is what I'm doing. I don't know if I should be doing it. Getting feedback, getting advice. If people stay in that conversation, I can almost guarantee they're going to get better.
So if they're staying in contact with their coach, sponsor, whatever,
That's,
be okay.
I know that this is like really simple, but like that's what we encourage people to focus on. Because what I believe happens is and I've seen this, hundreds of times here at Favor, and even before I came to Favor, in my work, I had a private practice where I specialized in like harm reduction, where I would work with people even if they weren't ready to quit. And almost every single time as I talked to them and over time got to know them, they moved into recovery. What happens is people talk about it. If you sit and you talk with another human being and you talk honestly about it, you don't tell that person what they want to hear. So if we're meeting and I'm telling him, oh yeah, man, I'm not doing anything ever again, and it's never going to happen, and in my mind, all I can think about is getting a hold of something. Do you see how that's not productive in any kind of way? But if I talk about it and I'm open to feedback, what will happen is my brain will start to work with this and I don't know if you've ever wrestled with a decision before. You know what I mean? Like wrestled with a decision, I should do this or I should do that. That's what starts to happen to the person in active addiction. It starts to bother them. It's called cognitive dissonance. It starts to bother them. Like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. But before that, you're like going on automatic pilot. You're just doing your thing. There's a phrase in 12-step rooms where it goes, AA ruined my drunk. And what that means is once you know, you can't ignore this anymore. Well, the only way you can know is if you're talking to people. So we would say encourage your loved one to keep coming to meetings or keep talking to a therapist, talking to a coach, talking to a sponsor, whoever they have in their life, keep them engaged in that process. And let that person try to work on them just as much as you are. What other thoughts or comments about that particular topic? Yes, sir.
Yeah, maybe like the acknowledgement of the negative side and sense of everything. Like, what if they go back down and everything's just a bad slope? That will inevitably harm the both of not only the addict but yourself, because you're only adding anxiety and tension to the both of you with the negative aspect of it.
Yeah.
So it just adds to the conflict of addiction.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the idea that it's very difficult for family. It's easier for me to do that because it's not my family member, because I'm objective. But there was a study done, and it was around video interventions not related to addiction but related to smoking. And there's two different ways to talk about things. One is called loss framed messaging, and the other is called gain framed messaging. And loss framed messaging is, if you keep smoking or you keep using drugs, you're going to die. Okay? Gain framed messaging is, hey, if you continue to work on this and you get back into meetings or you get back with your therapist, you're likely to find recovery, and the sky's the limit. Do you see the difference between these two messages? And what we find is, hands down, this messaging is better. When you look at it, when you've studied it, when you've researched it, yes?
Why do they have such negative advertising on TV? I don't understand that because I turn it off.
What kind of negative advertising?
With the lady that's got the jaw and the whatever, you know, instead of something positive.
Oh, you mean like this is what's good? Yeah, people are very misinformed. They also do that for some of the opioid ads, and there's this idea that you can scare a person,
Scare tactics.
yeah, into not using.
Everybody else, they don't hear you.
Most of the time, people. What if I were to tell you that the majority of people out there that are making decisions about this and guiding that type of stuff don't really study it, don't really read about it, don't really learn about it? What happens is you just go with what's called conventional wisdom. You guys know what I mean? You just go with what you sort of think is going to work because the person before you did it, or the system before you did it. And that's what's going on with scared straight ads. That's what's going on with those type of ads. And they're repeating that around the opioid stuff. They're repeating it. It probably won't change because it's generational in nature, it's historical in nature, it's traditional in nature. But again, a person responds better to what can I gain out of this than what am I going to lose. Now, I want to emphasize that if you're a family member, you may have difficulty doing that because of the history, because of the emotions, and you may be tired of it and totally worn out and be like, look, that's not my job to do messaging.
I won't do it again.
I won't do it again. So, is there a staff member here? I will give you $1 million if you walk into my office and get my computer bag and bring it out so I can plug this in. And we'll do that on the installment plan over time. So, now again, remember, we've talked about this a bunch of times. What are some of the factors that lead to whether or not a person will become addicted to anything? The biggest hands down thing, if you got kids, if you got grandkids, if you got neighbors, spread the word, get the word out there that if you can wait until you're 21, you decrease the likelihood of having a problem by 95%. Even if you wait till you're 18, you decrease it by about 91%. The drinking age should be lowered to 18 because there's not much of a difference between 18 and 21. The real difference, the real next big jump is 24. So the drinking age should either be 24 or 18. Do you follow me? Because kids could actually wait until they're 18. Will you take a picture of me?
No.
You're allowed to. The second thing is genetics. It's about 40 to 60% more likely if you have it in your family. Now, people overemphasize genetics. There are a lot of people who have it in their family that do not wind up with this issue. So, and then obviously environment, how much opportunity do you have? That doesn't necessarily mean at home. That can mean in the neighborhood. That can mean with peers. Length of using career means how long have you been doing this? And substances. Certain substances are more addictive than other substances. So we're going to go through a couple things real quick and talk about who becomes addicted, what it looks like. Remember, we've talked about this. There are a bunch of people doing things that are at a risky stage. That's the orange. So risky use is problematic. You can die from risky use, right? You can drive your car into a tree even if you're not addicted. Addicted in the classic sense is the brain change, and I'm going to talk about that. When we talk in here, we talk a lot. We make an assumption that you're dealing with somebody who's dealing with a brain change. That's just how we do it, guys. That's how pretty much every program like ours does it. We want to work with these folks too, though. And we have a lot of people coming here who are probably in the orange. We have to be conservative and try to encourage them to take the route that is the safest. Because technically, if you're in the orange, you can continue to use. You haven't crossed that line into the brain change. It's not going to become compulsive. everyone who's in the red thinks they're in the orange, right? So if you say to a room full of 100 people who are struggling with this, listen, the odds are that there are 3 or 4 of you that are actually like at the risky use level. Everyone's going to leave that night saying, yes, I knew it. I knew I wasn't addicted, right? Because what? If you're not addicted and you're just using it at a risky level, you can say things like, that's cool, I'll just back off, but I can drink again at New Year's, or I can, and if you're addicted, it will not stick to I drink again at New Year's. The deal would be like, it's going to split into some other stuff. So these are the criteria. This is about as close as it gets to knowing whether or not you've crossed the line. Tolerance and withdrawal are physical symptoms. Tolerance is it takes more and more to get the same effect. Withdrawal is when you don't have the substance, you're sick. When you get the substance, it goes away immediately. Craving and preoccupation is an internal process. You're thinking about it all the time. And if you've ever had a craving for anything, magnify that by about 5, 10, 20, 50 times. I mean, it never goes away. I literally thought that all human beings on the planet were walking around thinking about how to get high all the time. Because I was. And I thought it was like natural state of man. Until I got into recovery, I was like, oh, okay, this makes more sense. This seems more doable. I don't have to think about this all day. Can't control is you're going to drink 4 beers, you wind up drinking 44 beers. Can't cut back is I'm only going to drink on the weekends, but you can't stick to your same rules. You drink all week. Interpersonal issues, people are mad at you about it. Avoid non-using activities. I only go to where they're drinking or partying. I don't want to go to the party that they don't have alcohol. Great deal of time, it's a full-time job. Use despite physical and psychological dangers. Maybe you were told you had elevated liver enzymes and you continue to drink. Use in physically hazardous situations. I would say the best example there is repetitively drinking and driving. Enroll failure. You can't go to work, you can't go to school. If you meet 6 of those criteria in any type of pattern over a 12-month period, you meet the criteria for substance use disorder severe. The word addiction is not used. There is no such thing as addiction in the medical literature. So no one can be diagnosed with addiction. You'll be diagnosed with substance use disorder severe. And whatever the substance is goes at the beginning. So that's what your insurance claim would say. That's what the people at the rehab would have to say if you were in there. Do you get this? Opioid use disorder severe, alcohol use disorder severe, so on and so forth. And if you meet 6 of those, you meet the criteria. If you're me, you get a perfect score. It's the only thing I got 100% on. Right? Wasn't hard to get there. It's very funny. When family members have somebody to come in and talk to me, they'll be like, well, they're going to lie to you. They're going to lie to you. They're not going to tell you the truth, so you're not going to know what's going down. Here's what's interesting about this. A lot of people, when they come in and see somebody like me, they do back it off. They do diminish their use. They tell us less, but they don't tell us that they're not using at all, because that would also seem silly, right? Here's what's funny. Even when they back it off, they still meet criteria. You get it? Because typically it's so severe that even if you tell me that you do it less often, and even if you try to talk your way around it, you meet this criteria. That's as close as you get to an x-ray for this issue. Right now, that's as close as you get. We believe that there'll be an opportunity to do things like PET scans and SPECT scans in the future. I'm going to show you a picture of the brain. We think that that'll become commonplace because they're doing it in mental health and they're doing it in other areas like autism work, and it will spread to addiction. And you will be able to look at a person's brain and say, this is what's going on. You've crossed the line. Look, here's how we know. Dopamine is depleted. Now the person might say, that thing's wrong. That thing's all screwed up. Let me put me through it again. Let me see what's happening. But you're going to have, it'll be like, we want it to get to a point where we have something that resembles an x-ray. Why? Because it's hard sometimes to get people to understand that this is what they're dealing with. In the 1990s, in the mid-90s, I've shared this before, in all seriousness, I was comfortable with the idea of having mad cow disease. It was on TV. People had eaten a bad burger, and when you had a bad burger, you were like slurring your speech and walking into walls, and you couldn't sleep at night, and you were irritable. And I was like, man, I think I got mad cow disease. It doesn't have anything to do with the fact that you just drank 2 cases of beer and ate 45 Percocet, right? I don't know if I ate quite that many. Maybe I did. All right. And then again, it's because age of first use. and I can't talk enough about this. I feel like we got to change our conversation with our kids too, and we got to be realistic, and we got to understand that like experimentation happens, that people are going to try things, but we got to start having a conversation about, can you wait till you're 18? Can you wait till you're 18? Do you understand your brain is still growing? Do you understand that you cannot handle this? Not because you're addicted, not because of anything, but when you're 14 years old, it cannot handle being flooded with dopamine like this. It's just not, you're not designed like that. Yes?
Yeah, are you saying addiction starts when you're younger, or you could be addicted when you're older?
No, it usually starts, so this is typically how it goes down. You're not addicted here. Like, this is a person at the age of 14 starting drinking. You're not addicted here. I wasn't addicted till I got over here, but because I started here, it was much more likely. If I'd have waited till here, it's less. Because my brain is more mature. And drinking age is 21, but I'm telling you, there's very little difference between 18 and 21. There's a huge difference between 18 and 24. So either change it to 24, which no one will wait for, or move it to 18, and more people will wait because they know they're going to drink when they go to college. And so they start saying, what's the use? I'm going to go ahead and drink when I'm 16. Well, the difference is if you wait till you get to college, you are probably not going to become addicted. This is the piece of information that has got to get out there to kids. It's got to be managed differently. And it has to be more about realism, and it has to be more about, hey, dudes, girls, I don't know what you call girls, dudettes. Listen, dudes and dudettes, come on, man, focus on me. Listen, if you wait till you're 18, you decrease your likelihood of having addiction by 91%. Come on, man, like if you want to be able to party when you get older, then you want to wait. The method that I used with my daughter was, as we were going through some stuff, we're having, you know how it gets contentious, and I'm like, look, man, I'm done with this. If you want to be like me and never be able to drink again, keep it up. Keep it up. What I'm telling you is you can chill, and if you chill, you're probably going to be fine. If you want to be, 30 years old and at Christmas time being able to drink, then stop right now and give your brain a break. If you want to be like me and not drink ever again and kind of like sit it out, then cool, have at it. You get the idea here? Like, this is, put this off for a little while. And if we're able to get that, and I'm telling you, adolescents are incredibly astute. They understand bullshit. And they understand bullshit, right? Like, if there's any adolescents in here, you all understand bullshit. And they know that we're full of shit when we say, wait till you're 21. Because they know that we know they're going to get ripped at college, for example. Go to any college campus and find me the sober kids. You'll find some, but even the ones who aren't getting hammered are drinking some. And there are some maybe that are abstaining, but for the most part, it is an abstinence, hostile environment. Would you agree?
Yes.
And every kid knows that, and every college administrator turns a blind eye to it, and all the frats exist, and nobody is doing anything about it, and we're standing here saying, wait till you're 21. Do you see like the idiocracy of that? I refuse to take part in the idiocracy anymore. I'm going to say it like it is. It's 18. If y'all can get to like your college years, then I think that you might be ahead of this game.
It's going earlier than that now. It's going to middle schools.
Well, that's why we got to change the conversation. I believe it's going in middle schools and it's going in high schools because they think that it's inevitable once they kind of leave the home, once they turn 18. I mean, I could be completely wrong, but it would be a different approach.
There's a difference.
What's that?
I don't think they know there's a difference in their brain development. I don't think most of them realize that their brain isn't developed because they think they know everything.
Right. There's something weird that happens when a kid turns like 14 or 15, certainly when they turn 16. I've said this before, the asshole fairy sneaks in the room and sprinkles dust on them. Right? Sorry if there's any kids in here. I apologize. My language is awful. Yeah.
I mean, they'll get it from somewhere.
Now, what is that about? That is 100% about the development of the brain. It's what an adolescent is supposed to do. They are supposed to reject authority. They are supposed to challenge their parents and challenge the system because that's how they move forward. So it's not that kids aren't bad kids if they start to push back on authority. What we would have to do is arm them with different information. Now, and there will be some that it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what you say. Would I have listened to anyone? The problem is it has to be delivered in the right way, right? The person who's delivering the information has to do it in a way where the kids are like actually like listening and hearing you out. It can't feel like this. And it can't feel disingenuous. They have to be like, okay, that guy's reasonable. Let me think about that. And this is called progression, guys. Now, again, remember the substance involved can kind of increase that progression. If it's pills, if it's heroin, if it's cocaine, this can happen a lot faster than if you start with other substances early. You can like compress this down. Progression accelerated, right? All right, so let's jump into a couple other stuff. I use this to illustrate when people say, when people make comments, well, you did it to yourself, Rich, or so-and-so did it to themselves. This is the diabetes analogy. Diabetes, you give it to yourself, you put things in your body over and over again, and your pancreas stops producing insulin, right? People are telling you not to eat that way, you keep doing it anyway. Same thing happens with the brain. People are telling you don't use this, don't use that, you keep doing it, and your brain stops producing dopamine. And we've talked about this before. The problem is drugs produce an inordinate amount of dopamine that's not healthy for the human brain. You can't flood your brain with 1,300% increase in dopamine. If you do that too often, the brain will shut off the production of dopamine. That's dangerous. The brain is constantly trying to re-regulate itself. It's called homeostasis. And so here's what it looks like. And remember, the other theory that goes with this is that some of us who are more susceptible to this, we were born with less dopamine, or we've had experiences in our life that has pushed us to have less dopamine in our brain. ADHD, for example, kids that are ADHD, there's a huge connection between that and dopamine. Dopamine produces contentment. Dopamine makes everything okay. It doesn't make you high. Well, normal amount of dopamine doesn't make you high. It makes you content. Makes you feel safe. It makes you feel okay. An extra amount of dopamine makes you high. It gives you euphoria. If you have less dopamine in your brain, you're going to be constantly looking for something to stimulate you. Does that make sense? So if you're born with at an 8 rather than a 10, you just can't. It's like, what's next? What's next? If you know your loved one and you kind of think of them growing up, it's like it didn't matter if it was drugs or sports or like driving motorcycles or jumping off of roofs into the pool. Like, what's next? What's next? What's next? Come on, something, right? And that's because you're born. Some people are, and it's just like left-handed, right-handed, blue eyes, brown eyes. People are wired different. Would you guys agree? You're just wired different. It can also happen if you experience trauma at an early age. It can also happen if you have co-occurring issues. If you are at a low and you're walking around and you're 13 years old and you're hanging out at the baseball field, you're playing baseball, and this is what happened to me, somebody brings beer. Literally the beer they had was just a white can that said beer on it. It was the worst beer ever. It was generic beer in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It was like literally like probably squeegeed off the floor, right? So you got these guys, they bring it and you drink this stuff and boom, it's like it lights you up and it takes you to a 16. And all of a sudden you think you found the solution to all your problems because you've been walking around restless and now you feel okay. And not only that, you feel great. And you do it again, and you do it again, and you do it again. And the problem is if you do it too much, it backs you off to a 6. It starts to turn down the dopamine because too much dopamine is too much. And then bam, the next time you do it, you only get to a 12. That's still too much, so I'm going to pull you back to a 4. Danger. Well, you do it next time and you can't even get high anymore. This is when people start to say, I'm doing it to feel normal. And then bam, when you don't have it, you're at a 2. So you're just straight pissed now, right? Like, what's going on with me? And then do it again, you only get to a 6. Back you off to a 1. Now you can't even pull yourself out of the hole, even when you have the substance. And that's because of the depletion of dopamine, guys. And this is what it looks like. On your left, on your left, this is what a normal brain should look like. This is a normal functioning, firing brain that is experiencing life as you're supposed to. This is what it looks like, chronic substance use. So you got nothing there. You don't feel anything that resembles normal. It's not depression. It's just complete discontentment. Yes?
How long does it take, let's say you messed up, how long does it take? 3 months to get normal?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. It's different for different people. I felt substantially better at 90 days. The younger you are, the sooner you make a comeback. The substance has something to do with it. Some of the substances are harder to make a comeback based on the way they affect the brain. Methamphetamine, crack cocaine tend to be the worst, just because they're spikes. They tend to spike a lot. Nobody can say exactly how long it takes, but you do make a comeback from this after you get into recovery. Then you're also dealing with physical withdrawal symptoms. You're also dealing with these psychological cravings. You're dealing with triggers, and you're walking around with an empty bucket. You're trying to pour substance in it to make yourself feel better. And this is why, you go to bed at night and you say, I'm never doing that again. And you wake up in the morning and the first thing you can think of is, I got to get that. What the hell? I got to get that. And this is why, all the stuff, and I'm not making an excuse for anybody. And this doesn't mean you let anybody back in the house. It doesn't mean you pay for anybody's apartment and you do any of that stuff. You just got to know what you're dealing with. We're just desperately trying to fix this the only way we know how. Now, after we get exposed to recovery, you could say we have a responsibility to treat that differently, right? We start to learn about ourselves. Carolyn, did you
Yeah, with that previous slide, when their baseline is like back to 1, is that when they start trying other substances?
Yes, people will throw other things, absolutely. You'll start to try to crank it up a little bit. You don't do it, it's not like that's what's going on. You're just instinctually looking for anything that might be able to this is a really, really strange state to be in. This is very, very hard to deal with. Yes?
If it's an older person by, 65, 70, 80, still using, can they ever get there?
Yes, absolutely. This is not a permanent condition by any means. People talked about that yesterday you can have brain damage from other things that may have occurred while you were drinking. Or using. I'll give you an example. Like there was a kid who I was working with who was huffing dusters, and he had brain damage from oxygen being cut off from his brain. And he was not going to get back to normal in that regard, but it wasn't because of the addiction, it was because of the brain damage. And you can have other issues that come up, but as far as this goes, the brain is resilient and comes back. Absolutely. I don't want to detract from the fact that as you get older, there might be other things going on, but it's not because you can't come back from that. You absolutely can come back from that. And I wish I knew exactly how long it would take. I wish I could say to people that, hey, it'll be 30 days, it'll be 60 days, it'll be 90 days. I feel like people would hold on if they knew. There's no way to know right now.
Rich?
Yes?
Can a person measure their dopamine level to know
You
where
can.
they're at?
There's some places now in California that are doing these PET scans that you can't measure it, but you can show it on the brain. I believe that'll become more mainstream as we go forward. Do you guys hear the question? Can you measure your dopamine levels? You can't measure it, but you can get feedback from the imaging. Okay. Now, on the recovery end, this is where it gets very, very interesting. And you can't see this slide. I want to talk you through how people get better. And if you're dealing with this in your family, I want to try to give you hope. And I want you to understand exactly how this works. So there are about 22 million people, 22.5 million people in America who identify as being in recovery. Technically how it works, guys, when they do these surveys, it's like they do the survey to see if the person had a problem with drugs. Did you meet criteria for substance use disorder? And then they ask questions to see if that's no longer the case. Like you had a problem and you no longer had a problem. That's the definition of recovery for this study. It's not, did you work a program or anything like that. It's simply, this was destroying your life and it's no longer destroying your life, which is a good thing, right? Yes?
I noticed you're leaving out smoking.
Yes.
Is that, because it's under control now or what? I was a heavy smoker, so I know what addiction is. It's the hardest thing ever to do.
Yeah, it's a good point. Her question was, what about smoking? So You know, I think I don't want to discount smoking. I don't want to like minimize that, but I know as people are dealing with this, that's not going to be the thing that's going to wind up bringing them here, and that's probably not going to be the thing that's going to wind up bringing their family here. There is a lot of work to be done once a person enters into the process to kind of move forward in that, and we've seen a lot of people do that. But it's not going to be, the house is on fire not because of smoking. It's on fire usually because of heroin, cocaine, alcohol, that kind of thing. So we don't discount it, but we get to
What I'm
it.
doing is relating to addiction. I definitely can relate to that.
Yeah.
You're right, it doesn't affect other people around you.
I guess it could if you were secondhand smoke, but not nearly as much. Yes.
It doesn't make you grumpy and.
Well, it doesn't make it doesn't normally make you steal your brother's Xbox and pawn. No, it could. Yeah. So, but this was not concerned. It's a good question. This study did not concern smoking, though. It was other substances. But what they found was, you know, there were 22.3 million people who said, yes, I'm in recovery, or they identified as being in recovery. 54% were able to identify how they did it. I did it through, I went to rehab and I went to meetings. I did it through meetings alone. I did it through a therapist. This is what gets really interesting. 46.1% did not name a particular way they did it. Basically, they invented recovery on their own. Now you get that, that's not supposed to happen. You're supposed to only be able to get recovery through seeing somebody. Here's the deal. There's no truth to that. People get better in a wide variety of ways. When you talk to this group, what you find is even though they didn't identify it as recovery, they did some very common things. And you want to take a shot on some of the things that they did, even though they didn't think it was recovery.
Exercise.
They did exercise. They started to live a healthy lifestyle.
Get out in the nature.
That was this, and also they started to, here's one of the fundamental things. They started to pull away from the group that was using, whether it was alcohol, whatever the drugs was, and move toward a healthier group. They just didn't think of it as recovery. They thought of it as, holy cow, I'm going to die, let me change my behavior. And the way that I think, I don't care what you call it. Do you understand? I do not care what you call it if you get better. You can call it recovery, you can call it health and wellness, you can call it, hey, this is just what I'm into, this is my lifestyle. We just want to see you get better. And we have to, so one of the things that we really encourage people, and this is why trying to get people to come to Favor and trying to get your loved one to check out our meetings, is we will paint, we will open the doors wide for different ways to get this done. We are experts in recovery. We know how to do this, but you don't have to do it our way. I think we get ourselves in a jam as a society when we start telling people you got to do it this one certain way. And if you don't do it, you failed. You failed, man. You didn't get this done. You're not capable of doing this recovery thing. My uncle is one of these people. So my uncle's story is fascinating. It's kind of like alcohol, totally like by anybody's definition, an alcoholic, right? Just crazy. Blackouts, incident happens, and basically, like, you know how it hits the wall, kind of like, you're either going to stop or you don't. He stops cold turkey, man, and never takes another drink. He still wasn't 27 years later. And people, well, he's probably a dry drunk. He's living happy, joyous, and free. He has his kids. Everybody loves him. He's never punched a hole in the drywall. You know, he's good. What the heck happened? Now, if I said to him, you know, you are in recovery. Hey, Uncle so-and-so, you're in recovery. He would be like, shut up, dude. What are you talking about? I'm not one of those people. You get it? Because he would reject that idea. But then what I know is he started going to a men's group at church. And it was a prayer group, and they didn't talk about don't drink, but they did talk about maybe like changing who you hang out with and should you go over to the bar. And so he quit going to the bar. He became a health freak. Exercise, you know, eating kale sandwiches and drinking like the worst kind of shake you can drink, and like alcohol doesn't fit into that lifestyle, right? Is that person's recovery, is my recovery better than his recovery because I did it a certain way?
No.
Absolutely not. Is his life just as valuable as mine and just as good as mine and just as much to be celebrated as mine? Absolutely. This is what we miss, guys, and this is what we want to open your eyes to it as family members so that you know as things unfold, because if this is a journey and we believe that your loved one is going to have to try to figure this out, then encourage them to get here and encourage them to have conversations and explore ways that capitalize on the recovery principles. And you guys probably already know the principles, but it's basically like change environmental triggers, change environmental stuff, like what? People, places, and things. It's really hard to not drink if you're going to the bar every day. It's really hard to not use if you're hanging out at the trap house or you're still talking to the people who use, right? Very difficult. Get involved in something positive. Find something that's on the other end of the spectrum. Think about using over here and think about this over here. Self-improvement. I don't know what label you want to put on it. Healthy lifestyle. Get around a group of people who support a healthy lifestyle. If it's exercise, what's interesting is a lot of times what you'll find is people will exercise in a group. They'll start to become part of a run club. Or what's going on there is not just the exercise. What is it? It's the camaraderie. But understand more, and also maybe you see a therapist. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I feel like the sky's the limit on what, but get in touch with one idea. You do not have to do this a certain way. And there is no pass-fail in recovery. There is absolutely no pass-fail. There are too many people dying, and there are too many families being destroyed for us as a country to continue that bullshit. And the problem is, you got to be careful, because I'm not saying all rehabs will do this, but a lot of rehabs will say it's one size fits all. And if so-and-so doesn't do this, he will not make it. I've had those conversations with people. Guys, number one, it's 100% not true from a scientific, like factual basis. Do you understand that? There is no truth to that. This study was done by Harvard. This wasn't done by Rich Jones. It isn't like, I didn't just make that up. And then it goes on to talk about other things and how people do it. So there's a lot of other good information in there. People get, basically the summary is people get well in a wide variety of ways. And they all should be, they all should be celebrated. Where do family members come in this? The only thing that you can do is to push the person, nudge the person toward that type of stuff. If you're in the upstate, if you're in Greenville, the good news is you can nudge them here. They're not going to want to come, because why? Because they have a preconceived idea of what groups are. They think they may have had a bad experience. They may have never gone and they just said, this is what it's all about. You guys, unfortunately, you're the only ones who can kind of talk them through it. Put them on here and watch this video that I have on Facebook at this point in time. I don't know, we're about an hour in. Get them on here and get them to hear it. Like, you got to give yourself a shot, because there are other ways to do this. And we want to be in that conversation with you. We want to be part of that conversation. We want you to come to our groups. We want you to get a recovery coach. We want you to start talking about this stuff. You guys, the only thing you can do, though, is what? Sort of nudge them toward it. You cannot make them come. I wish that was the case. You know, you can't, and it wouldn't work anyway, right? Now, you can set boundaries and sort of start to do things that might nudge them toward it. What questions do you have? Yes?
I was just going to make a comment. When you talked about the things that the recovering addict would do to make themselves better, I thought about some of those same things or the things that we need to do for recovery for our own selves as well.
Yes.
And then the other thing, the sign-in sheet didn't come back this way.
Oh, drat. Get that sign-in sheet back there. So, yes.
And that's why I think there's so much issues with the AA, because it's kind of driven, you have to do this 12 steps this way.
Well, here's what I would say about that. I don't have an issue with AA doing that.
You know.
AA is a self-help group with volunteers. What I have an issue with is treatment centers doing that.
No.
Do you see what I'm saying? Like, I don't have any issue with a voluntary self-help group doing it. They can do whatever the hell they want. Like, hey, we play with rattlesnakes and it keeps us clean. Have at it. But health insurance should not pay for that. And a licensed facility should not be one size fits all. If I'm a medical provider, I have an ethical obligation to explore every single option with you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You know, you go and it's kind of like you got to do this. Do you guys get that? And we're at the front end of this. And not a lot of people think this way. Not a lot of people would agree with this. This is why families need to know this. Because sometimes you become the only person who can kind of give this information. It will be like, hey, why don't you check this out? Well, I've tried this before. This sucks. You know, I've done this. It'll never work. then that's where you have to be the person who winds up what? Sort of communicating that and saying, look, man, it is not how it works. You go, you check this out, you get some advice, you start to put this together, you start to figure out exactly how you're going to get this done. You start to learn about some of the things you can gain. What's the hardest part is getting somebody here, or getting them to like see a therapist, or getting them to do anything, right? Get them to even go to an AA meeting, get them to go to a therapist, get them to go anywhere is like almost monumentally difficult. Agreed? And the question becomes, how do you start to do that? Now, I wanted to go back to what you said about family members doing their own program. What's interesting is, if you look at intervention models, and you look at what we believe here, we follow an intervention model called ARISE, A-R-I-S-E. It's one of 3 evidence-based intervention models. And if you want to be an ARISE interventionist, or you want to get an ARISE intervention done on your family, the family has to agree to do a year's worth of programming. The family has to agree. Not the person does too, but we will not do it unless mom says, I'm going to go to Al-Anon, or I'm going to go to FAVOR groups, or I'm going to go to see a therapist. And the brother even says, you guys get that? Because the theory is, if the family quits, the person will quit. And if the family stays engaged, it increases the likelihood that the person will stay engaged.
Even if they're unengaged?
Even if they're disengaged, it increases the likelihood that they will become engaged. And if you do the intervention, it escalates because you get them in a room. Yes, ma'am?
So what if your family is your wife?
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, then you have to stay engaged. Now, it's interesting. It's a great question. We have a lot of situations where there's one person. It's hard to do an intervention if you only have one person. Sometimes you have to try to conjure up somebody else, or is there anyone else who would even be interested in being part of this? We have a lot of situations where it is one person. It doesn't really become an intervention. It becomes more like a meeting. It becomes more like a conversation. We would still say the same thing to you, though, that we would want you to keep. One of the interesting things, I will tell you this for me, when I was actively using, my wife started to go to Al-Anon with my mom. I call that the unholy alliance. And it's very uncomfortable whenever people know that you're coming to meetings like this. It's very uncomfortable for the person who's using. Anybody want to take a guess why? We know that they know you're talking about them, but also they know that you're getting information about doing something different. That something, and even if that doesn't mean they wind up in treatment, that means that something's going to be different. And remember, when you're in active addiction, what you want is you want everything to stay the same, even if it's highly dysfunctional, because that's the system that you're using to keep your addiction going. What happens, the reason why people are so mean when they're in addiction is they're protecting it. They want it back here, and they want you over here, and they want you doing exactly what they want you to do so that they can feed this thing. And this thing is behind them, whispering in their ear. As soon as you start to do something different, it starts to put pressure subconsciously on them. That like, whoa. And what if she's going to start, what if she stops giving me money? What if she stops letting me live here? What if she starts to find out the real deal? What if she gets information? You guys get that? And that's why letting them know that you're here and staying involved is part of the process. You will get to a point where, you might get tired of coming, or you'll get to a point where your loved one is stable and you'll stop, and you don't have to come as often, but you should be coming once a month, right? Once every 6 weeks, that kind of thing. We've had a lot of different folks come through. We've had a lot of different people come through. And I think that's something we have to consider. How do we stay engaged? You can't live crisis to crisis. You can't live problem to problem. But we do have a lot of people who've been coming long term. What happens with some of us as you come through this is you become a recovery coach. After you've been through this for a while, you say, well, I'm going to get involved, and I'm going to get on the other side, and I'm going to ruin some people. I'm going to ruin some addicts' days as a family recovery coach. Get mine, right? Now the other problem with this, the other reason to stay involved long term is, let's reverse the process. Let's talk about getting well. To your question, so let's say you go into recovery, and there you are. You're at a 1, and you do 30 days, and you improve, right? and your numbers start to come up, so on and so forth. As time goes by, it starts to come up. But here's the deal. It will not go above where it was at the beginning. You get that? You can recover to where you were, but you will not recover above where you were. So if I'm still sitting here with my deficiency, my dopamine deficiency, I've got to learn to manage that long term, right? Up to this very day. I'm very, very restless. I have big time problems sitting still. Major league issues with what? Workaholism, work addiction, just freaking trying to find something on any given Sunday afternoon to do. Like this thing, like this whole deal with like just spend time. Like I don't understand that at all. Like I'm good at like doing tasks. Let's take the kid to the movies. Let's take the kids to the soccer game. But let's just spend time. And do what?
Were you like that before?
Yes, absolutely. So in my case, what I believe, what the deal is, and this has to do with like a lot of therapy, a lot of conversations, is there were two things. I do believe I was born this way, but also I was exposed to trauma at a very early age. I've shared in here before. My father was a binge drinker, right? And so it was violent. It was calm, and then it was violent. And when I say violent, y'all can use your imagination. Bad juju. And so that also depletes your dopamine. So I believe I'm still dealing with this. And people say, this is where you got to get into prayer and meditation. This is where you have to work on core issues. This is where sometimes maybe there's some other stuff happening. This is why people have to do recovery for a really long time. You don't get fixed. Does that make sense? Because this is still the truth of my existence. Today, I just choose to not solve that by getting high or getting drunk.
You can solve it though with like antidepressant that raises your dopamine level?
No, you can't. I don't think you can solve dopamine with antidepressants. You can solve serotonin and other things. And you should get treated for other things. Absolutely. And I'm not saying antidepressant wouldn't solve that. What I know for me is that the biggest difference would be when I'm eating better and I'm working less, okay, and I'm managing my life better, then this is better, okay.
Balance.
What's that? Balance, yes. And so and caffeine is not good for this. And I run on caffeine, man. I'm like, and so right now, I'll give you an example, and this is just for me. This could be anybody. This could happen to anybody. This is very common in recovery. You go through periods of time, and like anyone else in life, you have different circumstances, right? So at FAVOR Greenville right now, the deal is over the last 18 months, maybe even 2 years, we've gotten blasted in a good way with all this opioid money and all these opportunities to do all these things. And I can't tell you how many places I've been requested to be, and how many different talks I have to give, and how many different trips I have to go when I leave again on Wednesday to go to Minnesota. And so, but today I said no to 3 of them because I'm snapping. I'm 100% overwhelmed with that, and it's affecting this. Because why? You don't get as much sleep, you run on caffeine, you just run on adrenaline. So that can affect it. It also, I do want to go back though and emphasize, like there could be co-occurring issues for a person here. This is, how do you get that taken care of? You got to see a therapist, you got to talk to a psychiatrist, you probably want to talk to a doctor. You definitely have to manage the way you're living. I mean, I got to tell you, I know how to not do it. I can tell you what won't work. Are you ready? Like 6 cups of coffee, 8 or 10 packs of zingers. Do anyone know what a zinger is? Those freaking like banana or like whatever vanilla cake things. Those are the best damn things ever. I'm serious. Like they're so good. And like throwing like 4 or 5 Red Bulls, right? That's not gonna work. That's not gonna work. Yeah. So what do? You got to change that. You got to work on that. You got to constantly be recalibrating. This is why recovery is a long-term process. It'd be great if we went through treatment and we came back to where we should be, but we don't. We still have to deal with that. It's kind of like, I don't know, I wish I could think of an analogy. It's sort of like, this is what you're born with, this is your cross to bear, figure it out, right? Manage it.
Is there a way to measure your dopamine level?
You can't really measure your dopamine level. As I said, you can get imaging that can show you. I've never done that. It's exceedingly expensive to get that done, guys. And insurance doesn't pay for it. There is, but there is not a test. They can't do a blood test. They can't do anything like that. It's because it's a neurotransmitter. They have to do imaging. This is an example of it coming back online. So this is 10 days recovery. This is 100 days recovery. This is what it should look like. Remember, I said cocaine and methamphetamine tend to be some of the hardest ones to kind of come through. I think it has to do with the fact that it's just such a spike in dopamine. But this is coming back online, and if you were to look 100 days out, it'll be much, much better. And people know this. We tell people this at Favor. People understand this. They get told this at the fellowships. You're going to get better. This is going to get better. You're going to get better. This is going to get better. But again, sometimes people won't hold on to that point, and they don't want to feel this way. Like the deal is, okay, it got better, but I still feel that way. You're almost making a choice. You're kind of like, okay, I get this. I understand that. So I'm never going to relax on a Sunday afternoon. Yes?
So what does Suboxone do in this?
So Suboxone stabilizes if you are dosed at the right level. Okay? Suboxone stabilizes it so you can get to here. Okay?
Does it take you above?
If you're dosed wrong. Do you understand what I mean? Like you can absolutely get high from Suboxone if you overdo it. And different doctors are much better at that and much more responsible than other doctors. Or if you take it for like 2 days and then don't take it for 2 weeks and then take it for 2 days, you're then using it recreationally. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you're not using it for the purpose that it is.
Is that a medication?
That is a type of medication that's used for opioid treatment. Well, so it's not necessarily addictive, guys. It's not about addiction. It's about, it's called a partial agonist, which means, like if you were to take an opioid in terms of binding to the receptor, let's pretend that's up here, okay? What this does is it's right here. If I were to take it today after being off of things for 19 years, I would be done. But if you gave it to somebody who has a very high tolerance, they're not going to feel it. Do you see what I'm saying?
So it'll make them feel better for a while?
Well, it stops you from having withdrawal.
Oh, okay.
Okay, it stops you from having withdrawal, but if you were to do it today without having any experience with opioids, we'd have to carry you out of here. But if you've been using 10 bags of heroin a day, it's not going to touch you. Do you follow what I'm saying? And do you guys get that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I do.
Yep. What you have to be careful of is how that the real big problem with opioids, guys, is the fluctuation in tolerance. It's very interesting how quick your tolerance can go down. This is why people coming out of rehab are most susceptible for overdose, because you can bounce back and forth too much. We support medication-assisted treatment 100%. Hands down, no questions asked, no agenda, no qualifications. Like, you got to figure that out with your doctor. But we would love to see you here while you're doing it. Here's my deal. Recovery is really about connection more than anything. The recovery process is about being around other people. Do people get better by themselves? Absolutely. But human beings need other human beings. And one of the cool things about recovery is I've been there, done that. I know what it's like to steal all the pills from somebody. I know what it's like to feel like the biggest piece of shit. I know what it's like to think that I'm never going to crawl out of this, that there's literally no way out. And I also know what it's like to be on the other side of that. That's a huge thing, guys. That's called believable hope. When you witness somebody who's been where you are and now they're on the other side. And how are you going to do that if you're just in your apartment? You're not going to get that from your buddies that are using. You got to get around some people. That's why we go so far out of our way to make sure we're welcoming people. People have such a misunderstanding about Favor Greenville. They're like, oh wow, over at Favor Greenville, hey man, they're ripping bong hits at meetings with people. They want people to get high. Absolutely not. Here's the deal. We want you coming in here no matter what, even if you are getting high. You get that? We would prefer you're not high while you're here, because that sucks. We would definitely prefer you're not drunk while you're here, because talking to drunk people sucks. That's the weirdest thing about my life. The greatest irony is I used to be really good at speaking drunk. Now I have to get a translator, 19 years later, it's really difficult. But we want you coming no matter where you are in the process. I'm telling you, man, what happens is people get around other people and they connect and they start to talk about things. And as they talk about things, they start to reconsider things and they start to reevaluate things. They may not quit right away. They may not even want to quit right away, right? But they're going to start to like play with this thing and work it through their mind. And do I believe most people will get to that decision? I do. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I have to believe that in order to do the work I do, but I've just seen it way too many times. I've seen the hopeless person make a different decision. Yes?
You talked earlier about when someone starts using when they're really young. Is the approach to recovery different for someone that started really young as opposed to someone that got addicted later on?
If they started real young? No, I think that you mean, and let's say that they're older than when they need to get, no, it would be the same. It'd be the same. The approach for a young person might be different.
Yeah. I'm
So,
not somebody that started at 12 and has struggled with this and is now 27.
yeah, no, we would say that that's the same.
Okay.
I started at 13.
Okay.
You're going to find, though, most people started when they were like young teenagers.
I started when I was 8.
So that you're an overachiever, brother. No, see, it's even. I mean, that's even.
It's got to be something that literally changes your life. I had a daughter when I was 17, and it changed everything for me. But my family was probably worse than yours. It was bad.
Yeah.
Really bad.
Well, and that's the other thing. Like, we got to also be able to get around each other so we can talk about stuff like that, because stuff and that type of stuff will eat you up too.
Yeah.
To be able, for me to, it was harder for me to talk about my experience in my family growing up than it was for me to talk about my own addiction. But I got to tell you, it was very freeing when I was finally able to talk about that, and I could talk about it anywhere now. I was a victim of domestic violence, or whatever you want to say. You know, incredible trauma, horribly difficult. How do you deal with this whenever the person that you love on Wednesday, you want to kill them on Friday, right? Very weird to grow up that way, very uncertain. You kind of creates this constant anxiety. I used to never be able to talk about that. But now I can do it, and I mean, I don't care what people think. They can think what they want. They can say what they will. And it feels good to be able to say that, right? You get that off your chest and you get that out. Yeah, you don't hold that in anymore, you know. Now, I talk in here about family recovery because for me, it was the thing that kind of got things going for me. This is a picture of me and my wife. This is a picture of me and my mom. And I had my mom and my wife split. This is a very common thing for people that are dealing with substance use. They will divide and conquer unconsciously. It's not like we sit down with a piece of paper and like map out our plan. It kind of happens naturally. And what do? We use one against the other. We tell one person this, we tell one person that, and we usually find one of the two. Sometimes it's mom and dad. In my case, it wasn't mom and dad. I was married. It was my wife and my mom. And I used my mom for emotional validation, and it had nothing to do with money. I was paying all the bills. It had everything to do with, you're not as bad as she says you are. Do you get it? And that was just as important as money. Because what would happen is I would run to my mom's house and I would get patted on the back and kind of like comforted. And she would make me dinner and we would talk about how bad my wife was. And then I would go back. Then what happened was, I told you, they formed the Unholy Alliance and they started going to meetings and finding out what the deal was. Just like you are right now, getting information about it. It wasn't set up like this. It was an Al-Anon meeting, but I have no idea how long they went before they finally said, that's enough, we're doing something about it, right? I have no idea. It could have been months. It could have been a year, I guess. I don't think it was. I picture it being like months, really. And then the ball started rolling, and I could see things start to change. I can look back, and I can tell you, like, they started to change even before they threw the hammer down, even before there was an intervention or anything. For example, my wife she detached and she stopped fighting it. She stopped arguing about it. She wouldn't say anything. And it was different than what was going on. So the deal would be, if you start to do something different than what was going on, the person can feel that. So if you're fighting constantly and you're always saying something and it's always a fight and it's always a wrestling match, the advice would be reverse field and start to try to detach. Or if you feel like you're overly involved. Do you get that? You're trying to do something that's the opposite of what is going down. Now, if you want to talk about detachment and how does a person detach, it's very, very difficult, and it's going to vary from situation to situation. But we'll talk about the idea, and then we'll talk a little bit about how do you do it. So detachment is it's misunderstood because it's frequently thought of as a physical act, where I move out of the house or I have them move out of the house. Detachment is actually an emotional act, and it comes actually out of the Al-Anon traditions. And remember, Al-Anon was developed in the 50s primarily for what? Wives that had to deal with alcoholic husbands. Okay, that's how it came up in an era when you couldn't divorce. Divorce was not socially acceptable. So you had to learn how to do what? Live with this son of a bitch. And so detachment was a good way to do that. It's the ability to emotionally pull yourself back from the situation and not react. So what does that look like? So-and-so is, on a smaller level, so-and-so is badgering you or raging against you or trying to get this or trying to get that. You simply do not react. You find a way, maybe you leave the house, but you don't fall into the pattern that you were into. Do you guys get that?
Yeah.
You don't fall into that circle. On a greater example would be so-and-so lands in jail and you literally let them figure it out. That would be another example. You're detaching from that, but the most important part is you're detaching emotionally. You know what I mean? You'll see people who will do things like, I'm not going to bail the person out, but they will be in complete turmoil the whole time. It's a mental process where you have to somehow be able to step back from that, but they still be able to sleep. And so this is where people talk about things like getting involved in groups, maybe getting a therapist. Al-Anon talks about this a lot. You literally practice the skills of detachment. A lot of prayer, a lot of meditation, probably a lot of sleepless nights at first, and then you get better at it as time goes by, where you can get to this point where you're not allowing the person to trigger you continuously all the time. It was mainly used between husbands and wives. One of the interesting things is sometimes you have to try to get in touch with kind of like, what's keeping me from being able to detach? What is the story that I'm telling myself that I can't seem to step back from this? Anybody have any thoughts on what that might be?
Afraid she'll die.
Well, that's like the most extreme version of it, right? There's usually a story about why I shouldn't step back, because if I step back, so-and-so will run away and go down the street and wind up living with so-and-so. You get that? And then that'll lead to whatever. Those stories tend to be 0 to 60 pretty quick. They tend to be catastrophized. Maybe it's bad, but maybe it's not quite this bad. Maybe it is that bad, but you don't know. And your detachment is not going to make that so. Yes?
Can you give an example of how your mother detached?
So my mother detached when I was younger. My mother detached, basically, she would tell you, because she had no choice. This was way before cell phones. This was way before anything. When I would leave the house, she just had to deal with it. Literally, she met me on the porch after one of these incidents. See, what would happen is that I would get kicked out and I would go to her crib and be like, she said, I've done my time. You can't stay here. And I remember thinking like, that's interesting terminology that she just used. I've done my time. As if being with me was being in jail, right? And that was all she did, was she just changed. I was no longer able to go there and be rescued. That didn't mean she didn't talk to me. It didn't mean that that was the thing that had to change. I'm sure she talked to somebody about that. Do you know what I mean? Somebody told her to do that.
It was like one focus.
But that was really all she had to change, right? There was no other, there was nothing else going on. I wasn't living at her house. Do you follow me? There was nothing else she could change. And then the detachment would have been just not letting me pull her strings and get back in.
She probably felt like she was enabling you not to work it out with your wife.
Yeah, and I literally think someone told her. I think that it was like, you got to do this. I feel like, I picture like this situation where they were at like a meeting and somebody said, and they shared it and people were like, what are you doing? You can't do that. And now that's very different than if the person's living with you. That's very different if there's money involved. There was no money involved. Like in my case, it was, I think in her case, it was a little bit more straightforward and probably to a certain degree a little bit easier because of that. I was 30 years old, you know, very successful, had money, had a place to live. She wasn't kicking me out into the cold. She was. Do you know what I mean? And so that's kind of, I feel like that the hardest part of detachment is to try to control the story and try to like stay focused in the moment and stay focused on the facts. Here's what's going down. I'm not letting him back in the house. This is what's happening for today. You know, I mean, anything could happen. With my wife, it's very interesting. She can articulate it very well on when she was finally able to detach. It had nothing to do with anyone dying. Somebody said something about that. It had to do with literally, like, where do I take the kids and where do I live? I'm going to have to live in the hood. I'm literally going to have to live in public housing because I made all the money. I made a bunch of money. I made more money doing that than I'll probably make in the rest of my life. And it was like I held her hostage via that healthcare business. Do you know what I mean? And so for her, it was literally, I need to get to the point where I don't care where I live. I don't care what the living conditions are like. I'm getting out of here. So she had to work that out in her mind before she could do that. She can articulate that much better than I can. And, you know, probably with much more passion than I can too. I mean, we remember that very well. It was ugly, man. It went on in a vicious cycle for years, guys. We repeated the same behavior over and over again so much that you could have written a script. I could, like, if we were watching it on TV, I could pause it and say, here's what's going to happen next, watch. Almost to the point where I feel like I could say, here's what she's going to say. Here's what he's going to say. And then you would just do it over again. I don't know if that happens to y'all or not, but like some version of that, you just do it over again. And so what you're looking to do you see how what you're looking to do is change that? And if you can't change it dramatically, change it in a little way. And one of the ways to change it is if you're a fighter, don't fight. If you're passive, maybe you do say something. You're trying to change it up and get the person to understand that I'm working on this and we're not continuing to do this. Yes?
Well, and there's just that moment, I mean, I had it a few days ago, what you say about say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean. And for me to get to that point was like a small miracle.
Yeah.
Because I was a screamer.
Yes.
And so when I finally got to that point and then I found myself using that, I mean, I was just like, yay, good job, you know?
Yeah. So and for you, when it's like the don't screaming part, right? It's very good. Like you identified that. That's a key kind of thing. Like you have to identify what it is. It's something different for everyone. For some people, it's just I'll give you money all the time. You know, for other people, it's I'll bail you out emotionally. You know what I mean? Or I'll make you feel better about the situation. One of the things you got to remember, if you have screamed and yelled at your loved one for a year about this, and you've done it like 10,000 times, 10,001 is not going to make a difference. It's not all of a sudden going to click in and be like, yep, okay, I get it. You're right, I quit doing drugs. I'll stop today. You got to change your behavior and you got to be strategic about it. And I hate to say this because this is about family and this is about life and death and it's about the most important stuff in the world, but guys, it is a chess match. And you got to get real strategic about this and start to say, and you might have to think it through before you move on it, right? You might have to talk to some people, talk to a coach. We have this card right here that has a 24-hour call line that if you call them and you're dealing with a situation and you want to process it with them, they will help you figure that out on what your move should be. Is it becoming more confrontational? Is it becoming less confrontational? You also have to know whether or not you can follow through on any kind of like boundary or quote unquote threat, that's a wrong word, that you might make.
But it's amazing how different the situation is the quieter I got.
I mean, guys, this is 100% valid based on kind of how families work, and it even transcends addiction. It's family systems theory. It's kind of like the thing that guides all family therapy. It's like a baby's mobile. You move one part, you move the other. Everything, rituals, roles, the way we respond to each other, what's okay, what's not okay, tradition, how we handle this, how we handle that. You know, whether we talk about things or whether we stuff things, whether we scream about things or whether we talk about things, it's all established there. And the thing is it's every single family. I want you to think about something. Even the people that you know the best in your life, okay? Even the people that you feel like are your best friends, you only see this much of their life. You only see this. When they're behind closed doors, they're yelling and screaming too. When they're behind closed doors, they're in a fetal position crying. You get it? Like, because you only see this much. And the part that they show you is not that. They show you the scrubbed up part. They show you the part that's like, yeah. And I just think you bullshitters. like one of the great things about being a therapist is you actually know the reality of like what's going down. Because you talk to so many people from so many different areas. So don't tell yourself we're the only ones dealing with this. Don't tell yourself there is no such thing as the Hallmark movie, right? The Hallmark movie. You hear people say, I just want to be a good mom. My wife has said, I just want to be a good mom. I don't know if I'm a good... Well, what does that even mean? How do we even know? Where do we even get that archetype or that is that that's because of things like stupid ass Hallmark movies. Like look at the Hallmark movie. I swear a lot. I know, guys. I'm working on it. I promise. I will get this under control.
That's the difference. Keep it up.
Okay. Well, I'm not swearing anymore. Watch this. I'm starting right now. There'll be no more. So, but it's like in a Hallmark movie, you know, it's just enough tension to make it interesting. And then we have like a moment of climax where everybody kind of has their fight, they have it out, and then they make popcorn Christmas ornaments and sing carols. And I'm like, whoa, that doesn't look like my family.
Same thing over and over.
Yeah, you know, and those images are thrown at us all day, every day. The way that they sell us things, guys, the way America sells us things is they don't sell us what we need. If it was only what we need, the economy would be broken down. They have to sell us what we want, and in order to make us want things, they have to make us feel like we're a piece of crap, so we run out and buy things. This is how marketing works. Yes?
I was trying to find something on TV the other day that didn't have violence and the bad news and all that. How much are Golden Girls?
Oh, that's a classic show. The Golden Girls, you cannot go wrong with the Golden Girls. Although I guarantee they were passing OxyContin back and forth. You can tell, man, I guarantee it. All right, so listen, we're going to wrap it up for tonight. I need to make one announcement about next Monday. Next Monday, we're going to be doing a group, but I'm also going to be sharing on some other things outside of family group, just about the direction of favor and some stuff that we have going on. And I'm inviting some folks who have been donors along the way and who have come to some other things. So it won't be a normal family group like tonight in terms of full-fledged topics like this. It'll be a mixture, and I'm going to go over some of the stuff. I'm going to talk about some of the basics, but I'm also going to share some big picture information about what we're up to, what we've been doing. I don't know if this group knows that we are in 7 different emergency rooms now. We're in 7 different emergency rooms in the upstate responding to substance use issues. About 400 plus patients have been picked up through those programs. So that was going from 1 emergency room in January of 2018 to 7, whatever we are now. So the good news is that people are taking note. We have a lot of kind of cool things going down. The bad news is that business isn't slowing down, right? We wish we were in a business that would start to slow down. But, I mean, I have to be honest with you. If anything, it seems like it's picking up. I don't know if that's about awareness or what that might be. So next week, we'll be talking a little bit about that. I wanted to give you that heads up so you know that it won't be quite a normal group. And then we'll obviously pick things up the following week.
I just want to reiterate about the cards, Rich. I called that crisis line a lot.
Yeah.
It helps.
Yep. So this is, you guys can grab one of these at the end of the day, at the end of the group, and sort of like check that out. do you mind if I share one other thing real quick, just so, let me see if I have it here real quick. So I wanted to share, all right, no internet. All right, so I want to share some information about an online learning management platform that we've developed to support families who are looking for recovery, to support families who need information. And it's pulling up right now. So for years at FAVOR, we've known that some folks aren't going to get here. Some people just aren't going to be able to get here. And we also know that people need supplemental information along the way. And I've tried 3 or 4 times to kind of get this going and start videos where I get out. So this is, you guys know I have a blog called The Recovery Cartel, and I do carbon stuff. This is like the Recovery Cartel polished up. This is an actual learning management site with high quality videos. I'm gonna demo a couple of them and then talk you through it. So basically it has 3 different sections that you can get involved in. The first one is education, and education is just as it sounds. These are about 5 or 6 minute videos on all kinds of different topics related to what is substance use disorder. So if you have somebody who's not coming in and who thinks, who doesn't want to talk about this, maybe they go on and they learn about what addiction is. It's a lot of the stuff that I talk about in here, except delivered on video. All right, so a couple more points, and I'm going to show you this, and you can kind of check this out, and hopefully this will make sense. The stigma around this issue, and the idea that family members are saying, is this what is this? Is Johnny doing this on purpose? Is it a willful behavior? And people say, no, it's a disease. One of the arguments is it's not a disease, Rich, because you gave it to yourself. And so here's the idea around any chronic lifestyle disease. Let's talk about diabetes type 2. Diabetes type 2, you give it to yourself. Type 1, you are born with. Type 2, you develop it over time. How does it work? You put things in your body that you shouldn't. So this graphic, what we have is we have 2 different, you guys just heard this. So this is a 6-minute video. This is a series of 10 videos that breaks down all that type of stuff, okay? That's all under education. And if you look under education, you have 5 different series that you can go through. Each one is about 5 to 6 minutes. Each one has to do with family information related to substance use disorder. All the stuff, they're all done by me. It's all the stuff that we talk about in here. There's some additional information like these ones have employee support. It could be employee support or it could be individual support. This is actually like for the person who might be struggling. So that's all under education. The other thing that we have are stories. These are exactly as they sound. These are people's stories of recovery with me interviewing them. All right, so this is, just interviewing people through what they've dealt with, different issues, different things. Like, I feel like this is an interesting one here where you have Joey talking about his history with Adderall.
In college, like many college kids, and even high school kids, I got introduced to Adderall, which was supposed to, help me with school, but really it just helped me stay up all night and drink.
Yeah. Performance enhancing drug.
Correct,
yes.
Correct. This was this crazy drug that allowed you to.
So that's just all stories. There's got to be about 130 episodes like that on there, from all different perspectives, all different socioeconomic classes. And then the final thing is every week we'll be releasing an exclusive podcast with Edwin McCain and I co-hosted. Edwin's in recovery himself. And so this is just different topics where we go on and we talk about different issues.
Is there a password required for the public?
Hold on. All right, well, welcome back. We're going to continue these critical conversations. And this comes out every week, okay? And then there's also additional content. This costs $9.95 to sign up and $2.95 a month. It's about a $39.95 kind of deal. Less than half what you would pay for an individual session if you had somebody. We try to do this for free with Favor. This isn't a Favor endeavor. This is a for-profit technology company. It costs $400,000 for that website. Okay.
Okay, you said $9.95 and what?
$9.95 setup fee, $2.95 a month.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so
Let's do
what
it.
if you go on there? There's a drop down. It should be up and running. It'll say, "How did you hear about us?" Favor Greenville. Favor Greenville gets a revenue share then if it's a Favor Greenville referral. Okay, this is obviously not required for anything. This is supplemental information. If you want to check it out, it's uturn.net. What you see here is not the page you'll land on, because this is the back end. This is actually the demo. The page you'll land on is just this. And then you can decide what you want to do, right? You can go personal. We started by selling this to businesses, guys, and we've sold this to about 8 or 9 different businesses around the country at this point. But people started to say, "Can we get it?" And so you can go on, and if you choose to, you can sign up and do and all that kind of thing.
Do you
all right?
have, for lack of a better term, a trailer for that we could
Yeah, right
send
here.
people through?
Right here. So if you wanted to send that to people, you could. Okay? Any one of those you could send, or they could go on here and check it out. With families, what we have found, families through treatment centers, through recovery centers, this is being mostly used, and I'm going to be going over this with coaches, and I'm going to be encouraging coaches to use this with their families. This is mostly used for people who won't engage in any kind of like traditional recovery support. They won't come here. Hey, I'm not going to go over there. I don't want to be part of that. Can you take a look at this? Maybe it's somebody who's banging away on this isn't a disease and this isn't anything, and these guys are all losers and they just need to suck it up. Get them to this. This has, what you're going to find is that this has heavy hitters on it, man. Like, this is no joke. Like, we're very serious about this. We're very serious. Like, the time, energy, effort, and money that was put into this, if you compare this site to other sites that say they do this, you're not going to have that type of feel. Any questions about this?
Just one. So you pay that $9.95 setup,
And then $2.95 a month.
You get a password, but can you give that to your loved one, or they got to pay their $9.95?
No, you can share with them.
Share.
Well, I mean, it might be hard to share from 2 different IPs. I'm not sure how that would work. You know, I'm not the technology guy. I got to tell you how little I had to do with the technology. Okay, what I did was do the content. All right, and this started off as kind of like, how could we do some things for Favor Greenville? What we have found is we can do this revenue share, but also we've dedicated a pledge from any kind of proceeds to Favor Greenville. And we're just pushing the word out, man. If you want to check it out, get on there. We believe this is the wave of the future in terms of getting this information out. Tonight, everybody in Greenville that needs this is not here. But could they get on here at their convenience? And would it lead to some other kind of support? We don't do recovery coaching. If they need help, they get sent here to Favor Greenville. If it's across the nation, we've hooked up with a couple other providers. So, take it for what it's worth. Check it out. If you have any additional questions, please grab that card. Otherwise, we are free to go. Have a great night. Thank you very much.
My therapist sent me here. She said, "You might come back for me." I said, "Sure."
Right.
And she
Good, how are you, brother?
Yeah. Oh yeah, all the time. I think that there's no right or wrong answer. Like, you talk to 10 different people, you get 10 different answers. So the thing that I think you got to do is you have to start getting a little more information and see what you get comfortable with. What you're going to hear is you're going to hear a lot of these different options, and then you're going to know more about it, and you're going to be able to make a better decision. No one can tell you exactly what to do. Like, I would never let you say you should walk in. I don't need that. But I do think what you got to do is make an informed decision. And the only way you can do that is through information, education. How it plays out, I think, is just multiple different ways. You may want to call this and talk to an individual person. They can get you an individual coach to talk to. You got to start figuring out the strength.
All right.
It's too.
I've been working on it 12 years.
Well, the thing is that a lot of times advice is given around, just thrown around, and people tell you things like you should just walk away without knowing all the facts and without knowing all the details. You know, I just don't do that.
These were professional people who based on what I had told them, so.
Well, do you think that they were? If you think they were right, you should follow what they said.
I feel I should make one more effort.
Well, you can do that.
A coach has been really good.
And what they'll do is they'll talk you through that too.
Favorite
Whenever you
coach.
call there, if you say like, is there any way for her to get involved, or her to get a coach, they'll talk you through that too.
Yeah.
Is she? Where does she live? Okay. Is she done? Has she ever been here?
Oh, no, and she was in mine, she doesn't think she doesn't qualify.
I would try real hard to try to get her here. Has she ever been anywhere?